A few years ago, I went to this big Halloween party. It was at a friend of a friend's house, so it was one of those parties where you only really know a couple of people. The place was packed. It was hot. The music was way too loud, and everyone had put a lot of effort into their costumes. I was wearing something pretty low effort, just a standard black suit and some fake vampire teeth. I was feeling a bit awkward, so I was mostly just hanging out by the kitchen, holding a drink in a red plastic cup and watching people. After about an hour of this, someone came and stood next to me, leaning against the same wall. Their costume was amazing. It was a full-head, incredibly realistic fox mask. The fur looked real, and it had these glassy, intelligent-looking eyes. They were wearing a sort of old-fashioned tweed-looking suit that was a bit worn at the elbows. It was a great costume, a little strange, but really well done. We just kind of stood there in silence for a minute, and then I complimented them on the mask. They nodded, and their voice came out all muffled and distant from inside the head. We ended up having a pretty long conversation, just shouting over the music. We talked about movies, what we did for work, the usual party small talk. They had a really calm, relaxed energy, which was a nice change from the chaos of the rest of the party. It was a totally normal, friendly chat. The only weird thing was that they never took the mask off, not even to have a drink. After maybe 20 minutes, they just kind of touched my arm, gave a little wave, and then disappeared back into the crowd. Later in the evening, I found the friend who had invited me, the host of the party. I mentioned the person in the amazing fox costume and asked who they were. My friend just got this really confused look on her face. She said she had no idea who I was talking about. She told me she knew almost everyone at the party, and nobody she invited had a costume like that. I figured it must have been a +1, someone she just hadn't met yet. I described the suit, the mask, everything. She just shrugged and said it didn't ring a bell. I didn't think much more about it until a few days later, when my friend posted a big album of photos from the party on social media. I was clicking through them, remembering the night. There were tons of pictures of the exact spot in the kitchen where I'd been standing all night. I was in a bunch of them, half hidden behind other people, looking awkward with my plastic cup. And in the photos from the time I was talking to the person in the fox mask, I'm just standing there, talking to an empty space. In several different pictures, taken by different people, I'm clearly in the middle of a conversation, gesturing with my hands, smiling. But I'm facing a completely empty space. There is no one there. There's no fox mask, no tweed suit, just a gap in the crowd right where they should have been. I've gone back and looked at those photos so many times, and every time I just get this unease. I have a clear memory of that conversation, but according to every photo that was taken that night, I was just standing alone, talking to myself. In college, I had this part-time job at a funeral home. It sounds grim, but honestly, it was quiet. The pay was decent, and it fit around my class schedule. It was a very old, stately kind of place. All dark wood, thick carpets, and the faint, sweet smell of lilies and cleaning fluid. My job was mostly just to be a presence during viewings. I'd greet people at the door, make sure the tissue boxes were full, and just generally make sure things ran smoothly. It was a job about quiet observation, and after a while, you start to notice the little details, the small things that are out of place. The funeral director was a woman in her 60s who had been in the business her whole life. She was very professional, very composed, and she had a specific way she wanted everything done. Every morning before a viewing, we would go in and do a final check of the room. We'd adjust the lighting, straighten the flower arrangement sent by the family, and make sure everything was perfect. It was a routine, a checklist. After my first few months there, I started noticing something odd. Sometimes when I'd go into one of the viewing rooms in the morning, there would be a single flower that wasn't there the night before. It was always the same type, a white gardenia. and it was always in the same place, resting on the velvet cushion of the kneeler right in front of the casket. It was never part of any of the sprays or arrangements. It was just one perfect, freshly cut flower, sitting by itself. The first time I saw it, I assumed it was from a family member who had come by early. I just picked it up and discreetly placed it in one of the larger bouquets, but it kept happening, maybe once or twice a month. I'd come in, and there it would be, one white gardenia on the kneeler. I knew the building was locked and alarmed all night. No one was coming in. I started to get a little spooked by it. I finally got up the nerve to ask my boss about it. I found her in her office one morning after I'd found another one. I held it out and asked her if she knew where it came from. She didn't look surprised. She just sighed, this long, tired sound, and took the flower from me. She looked at it for a moment, then told me that it was just something that happens sometimes. She said that when it does, I was to just remove it and not to mention it to the family. She was very calm about it. I pressed her a little bit, asking what she meant, and she just gave me this look. She said that in all her years, she had noticed a pattern. She told me the flower only ever appeared for people who had died suddenly, in an accident or from something unexpected. It never showed up for the elderly or for those who had been sick for a long time. It was only for the ones who were taken too soon. She didn't have an explanation for it, and she wasn't looking for one. For her, it was just part of the process now, another box to check. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Her calm acceptance was so much creepier than if she had been scared. It was institutional knowledge. This impossible, gentle thing was just a quirk of the building, or something residing in it. My last month working there, I came in to prep for the viewing of a young man who had died in a car crash. I walked into the room and the air was thick with that heavy, sweet gardenia smell. I looked at the kneeler. There were 3 of them lying there together. I just stood there for a long time before I picked them up. I graduated not long after that and had to quit. You know how every neighborhood has one of those houses? The one that's just off. It's not necessarily falling apart, but the curtains are always drawn, the lawn is a little too long, and there's just a general feeling of stillness about it. In my neighborhood, it was the last house on the block, a small, dark brick bungalow at the end of a cul-de-sac. As kids, it was an unspoken rule that you skip that house on Halloween. It was just common sense. We didn't know who lived there, or if anyone did, and our parents had told us to just leave it alone. I must have been about 9, and it was that perfect kind of Halloween night. It was cold enough to see your breath. The air smelled like wood smoke and dead leaves, and the sound of kids yelling, "Trick or treat," echoed from a few streets over. My best friend and I were out, our plastic pumpkin buckets already getting heavy with cheap chocolate and hard candy. My costume was a generic superhero thing, just a blue jumpsuit with a cape that kept trying to choke me. My friend was a ghost, a classic white sheet with the eye holes cut a little too far apart. We were at the top of the cul-de-sac, and we just stood there, looking at the dark house. My friend was the one who suggested it. He dared me. He said we had to go. I remember my stomach doing a little flip, that mix of fear and excitement you only get when you're a kid. We walked up the driveway, our footsteps sounding way too loud on the cracked concrete. The porch light was off. There were no decorations, no jack-o'-lantern, just a heavy wooden door with a tarnished brass doorknob. My friend froze about 10 feet back, but I felt like I had to see it through. I walked up the 3 steps, my plastic cape dragging behind me, and I knocked. It took a long time, so long that I was about to turn and run. But then I heard a slow, heavy scraping sound, and the door creaked open just a few inches. An old man was standing there. He was very thin, with pale, papery skin and white hair. He didn't look scary. He just seemed incredibly tired. He looked down at me and then at my empty hands, because I was too nervous to even hold up my bucket. He said, in a very quiet, raspy voice, that he was sorry, but he didn't have any candy to give out this year. I was about to just mumble okay and leave, but he told me to wait a second. He kept the door open just a crack and disappeared into the darkness of the house. He was gone for maybe a full minute. When he came back, he reached his hand out. He wasn't holding candy. He was holding an action figure. It was a specific one, a Space Marine type character, and I recognized it instantly. I had lost that exact toy at the park across town maybe 2 months earlier. I knew it was mine because I had broken off the little antenna on its helmet trying to open a can of soda with it. The antenna was still broken. The old man placed it in my palm. He told me he'd found it and had been keeping it safe for me. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at it, then back up at him. He gave me a small, sad smile and then slowly, quietly closed the door. I walked back to my friend, who was wide-eyed. I just held out the toy. He didn't understand. We both just turned and looked back at the house. There were no lights inside. The windows were dark and dusty. It looked exactly like it always had. Empty. We heard my mom calling our names from the other end of the street and we ran, not really saying anything else about it. The next day, in the bright sunlight, we rode our bikes back down the cul-de-sac. The house looked even worse. The paint on the door was peeling, and a thick layer of old, yellowed newspapers was jammed in the mail slot. My friend's older brother told us later that no one had lived in that house for at least 10 years, not since the old woman who owned it had passed away. But I still have the action figure. It's in a box in my parents' attic, and it's missing its antenna.